What's the first thing you think of when you see this? What about this? What do both of these have in common? Well, these are both coaster clones. Over time, clones have kind of gotten a bad rep, and I've actually wanted to make a video on this for a long time because I feel like clone coasters are kind of overhated. But alas, this is not me telling you why clones are great for the industry and why we need them, because you already knew that and you're still going to complain about them anyways. This video is more going to be an examination of clones, their evolution over time, and how we're about to see a new wave of clones, just maybe not in the way you might think. Stick around, it'll make sense later. I think the first major clone coaster that people associate with the mass production of clones was the Arrow corkscrew model. Yes, I know, it was Arrow. It was Arrow. Yeah, actually there's a couple of Schwarzkopf clones I left off this list. They're all pretty popular, but I don't know. I just forgot about them. Sorry. People always hate on Vekoma for introducing clones, but in actuality, it was Arrow. These corkscrews went up like clockwork. And yeah, there were slight variations, but there are also variations of the friggin' SLC, okay? That doesn't make it any less of a clone. These went up everywhere, like there's literally even one at Cedar Point. Come on. If CP buys your things, you know you got a winner. And honestly, I don't mind these corkscrews. I don't think they're such a sin. Yeah, they were everywhere, but they were pioneers for inversions, and Arrow made bank off of them, so it was a win-win for everyone. However, much like with everything Arrow did, we had Vekoma over here being like, hey, maybe we could try that. Enter the Boomerang. Well, the corkscrews started the trend of cloned coasters. These started the trend of bad cloned coasters. And you know what? I can't even defend these things. I defend a lot of things that people talk shit on, but I gotta admit, these are just so bad. I've actually only been on one of them, and it's literally the best one out of all of them, and even that I wasn't a huge fan of. It was better than I was expecting, but that was only because whenever people do go on Boomerangs, it's always... But this one wasn't necessarily painful, it was just uncomfortable. I feel like there are some things that should not be done backwards in the coaster, and a vertical loop and a tight cobra roll are certainly two of them. Airtime hills, turns, twists, backwards, they're all right, but inversions, no. That should be exclusively forward. I can't even imagine how horrible it would have been without those vest restraints. But as much as they suck, I still can say I hate them because without them, the coaster industry might be entirely different. These Boomerangs, and basically all of Vekoma's clones in general, played such a key role in taking down Arrow sales, which eventually killed them off. So without them, Alan Schilke might still be working with Arrow, and if so, no Janika and no RMC. So in some sick, twisted way, Vekoma copying Arrow and then driving them out of business was a good thing? I don't know. They didn't exactly copy Arrow. The track was basically the same, but the Boomerang itself was a little unique. Doesn't say that way, but hey, the Boomerangs were unique, okay? The next chapter of the cloned coasters was Batman the Ride. Alright, I'm gonna be straight up, these rides are incredible. I did a mini breakdown on my Defending Six Flags video, which is actually one of my best videos. I mean, I sound like a deflated balloon.
You start off with this twisted drop. It's fine, nothing special, but it's not bad.
But in summary, Batman the Ride has a perfect flow of elements that keeps you engaged the entire time. This was probably one of the most influential coasters ever. This new concept exploded in popularity and then evolved into other models like flying coasters or launch inverted coasters, but we'll get to that a little later. B&M inverts are everywhere, but Batman the Ride in particularly might actually be more popular than you think. Think about it, almost every single Six Flags has a Batman the Ride, even if it's not called Batman the Ride. But then there are just some random parks that have a Batman the Ride clone. Like, you got one in Japan, one in Spain, there's one at SeaWorld San Antonio, in Texas. Think about that for a minute. There's 3 Batman the Ride clones in Texas. That is more coasters than in the state of Nebraska. Look, as popular as these are, they're still great rides, and honestly, I look forward to riding more of them in the future. I've heard some run better than others, so I want to see what a Batman the Ride clone looks like when it's hauling full speed. However, just like with the Arrow corkscrew, Vekoma decided to dip their feet in the clone industry again. But this time they just blatantly copied B&M. I mean, it's not even like they were trying to hide it this time. They just went full copy and paste with the twisted drops, the over-the-shoulder restraint, and the big inversions. And look, we know these are bad. I could spend an entire video roasting these things, but what's the point? You've already heard it a million times. They're rough, they're janky, they're boring, they're the same, they're everywhere. They suck. But yet again, they did serve a purpose, which is why I'm not gonna hate on them as much as you might have thought when you clicked on this video. Because like all other clones, they offered parks a cheap option. B&M inverts are not cheap, so SLCs gave parks a budget-friendly option if they want to have an inverted coaster without having to rob the bank. And because of that, they were really popular among among small parks that couldn't afford any better. The first of these went to Gardaland, and since then, it spread like the plague. I think this was definitely the most successful clone to date, and proved that clones are still viable because we got a whole lot coming up. 1996 brought us the introduction of a new manufacturer in the clone scene, Mack Rides. This was when Mack introduced their Wild Mouse, and since then they've played a huge role in cloned coasters. But yeah, you know about these things, they were actually everywhere. I mean, one even made it into a friggin' Disney park. Well, these layouts were slightly different sometimes. There's only so much you can do with twists and drops. These Wild Mice were good, but not outstanding. I don't know why they were so popular, but whatever, moving on. The next B&M invert wannabe was the Intimate Impulse, but I do think this was better than the SLC from an originality standpoint because it actually incorporated something new, a launch. I haven't actually been on one of these, so these are pretty hard to judge because on one hand, the layout's not much. But on the other hand, it might be cool to go through an inverted launch forwards and backwards. I just want to be in a coaster and be going backwards just to see the ground recede for me, you know? I don't know, I've always been intrigued by these and always wanted to get on one, and it's why if I go to CP anytime soon, Wicked Twister of all things will be the first ride I run to. That's a lie. I knew that was a lie when I wrote that in the script. I'm running to Dragster or something. That was a lie. But I've heard these rides are pretty good. The first one opened at Tokyo Dome City, and while the Impulses haven't been as popular as, say, the Boomerang or the Corkscrew, there's still a good bunch of these. And again, one's at Cedar Point. If Cedar Point's got it, it's gotta be good. One thing I do want to mention, though, is this is where clones shifted from big layouts just being replicated to compact rides that take up small plots of land. Alright, there's only like a couple left, so I'm gonna speed through them. Mauer Spinner. It's a spinning coaster. That's pretty much it. Blue Fire. Mack's first launch coaster. Weak launches, decent layout. Skyrocket 2, turn Premier into a major player. Cheap, affordable, and perfect for small parks. SNS Free Spin. You've probably complained about one of these before, you know what they are. Mack Power Splash. Haven't seen a lot of these yet, but if they catch on for Six Flags, then yeah, I'm sure we'll see a lot more of these. RMC Raptor. Crazy intense, breakneck pace, yada yada yada. There's no way you haven't heard of one of these yet. Alright, that's all the mass clones, but there's a whole nother type of clones I haven't talked about yet. These are rides that weren't designed to be mass produced, but for some reason, they were cloned, maybe once or twice. Usually it's only once, so I call these twin clones, but it can happen more than once, like with Superman the Ride. It was designed for a specific park with the terrain and the park lineup in mind, but its success led to it being replicated at a couple of other parks. Some examples of textbook twin clones are Manta and Acrobat, the Ride of Steel clones, Shellraiser and Takabisha, and iSpeed, and its Turkish clone that everyone always mentions for having lap bars, but no one knows the name of. All of these rides were built at one park and were super original to that park, but for one reason or another, they got cloned at a different park. Six Flags does this a lot, like with Bizarre and Scream, the Mr. Freeze clones, and the Dark Knight Wild Mice. A lot of these times, these were just custom, full-scale coasters that were designed at a park's request, but then another park just decided to copy it to save money in research and development. This can be a good thing or a bad thing. On one hand, if you copy a good ride and keep the theming and atmosphere, you can successfully have the same standout attraction at two separate parks. Think the Ride of Steel clones or the Mr. Freeze clones. But then on the other hand, if you copy it but strip it of what made it special, like practical effects or theming, then you just have a skeleton of what the ride truly is in the case of Acrobat or Scream. But I think this is the way clones are headed towards the future. Twin clones are starting to become more popular, even just beyond Six Flags. Of course, there's the obvious examples like Terran and the Cheetah Hunt near clones that everyone's complaining about, but then there's also other ones like the Jersey Devil clone that was going to Magic Mountain, Decepticoaster being a clone of Incredible Hulk, and even that King's Dominion wing coaster that was rumored for a while was a near clone of a wing coaster in China called Heaven's Wings or Wings of Glory. Both wonderful names, you couldn't tell. There was even a coaster that looked like a near clone of Goliath at Six Flags Dubai. Twin clones are starting to take over regular clones, and it makes sense. In the current landscape of the coaster industry, it makes sense that parks want to have more unique experiences, even if it's just for a filler coaster. I don't think people realize how close parks are to each other nowadays. The competition is there. And you could say, well, a lot of these parks that are close to each other are just tiny, irrelevant parks that only have clones or kiddie coasters. But that's my point. All these tiny parks already have a Skyrocket 2, or an SBF Visa, or a Mauer Spinner. The big parks need something to differentiate itself from these tiny parks. If they're adding something that a park already has down to the T, then that is no bueno for business. So what do they do to cut costs? They buy an exact replica of a coaster that's on the other side of the planet to bring in new crowds of people who haven't been on this ride. I mean, maybe they're just lazy and I'm overthinking this. I don't know.